So, the Paris Olympics just came to an end, but before we draw the curtains on the games, here's five scandals that you may or may not have caught throughout these summer games. We're going to start here with the opening ceremony. Now, it was a truly spectacular opening, with the athletes parading on the Seine River, with Celine Dion performing. But what you may have missed was that at some point during the performances, a bunch of people dressed in drag. If you're not aware what drag is, it's essentially usually men dressed as women, and essentially, and a bunch of people dressed in drag struck a pose that was remarkably similar, remarkably reminiscent to a 15th century painting by Leonardo da Vinci depicting the Last Supper, which, if you don't know what the Last Supper is, it essentially is the last meal that Jesus Christ had with his disciples before his crucifixion. Now, of course, this sparked a serious outrage among the Christians, the Christian community, and and of course, the Paris organizing the Olympics organizing committee was quick to say, well, wow, this is not our intention. Our intention is to promote inclusivity. I'll read you the quote here. The official X account for the Olympics shared photos of the moment, and they referenced Dionysius, the Greek god of winemaking, fruitfulness, and ecstasy. And the interpretation of the Greek god Dionysius makes us aware of the absurdity of violence between human beings. That's what they say they were going for, and not trying to willfully infringe on what is important to Catholics or Christians. Well, that's not necessarily the way people took it. What would Jesus say about that? That was the first controversy of the Olympics, and we were like, okay, it's about to be an exciting one. Well, you thought it was exciting then. Wait for number two. Obviously, the controversy of the entire Olympics, Imani Khalif. Imani Khalif, if you were not following the stories, an Algerian female boxer, and you'll see why I hesitate to say female, because you'll kind of understand how that becomes a controversy as we proceed. But Imani Khalif, is fighting was in a very first bout of the Olympics, was fighting against an Italian lady called Angela Carini. They exchanged a few punches. 46 seconds into the bout, Angela Carini goes, "I've had enough. I don't think I want to do this anymore." She didn't want that smoke. She will proceed to say later on that she had never been hit that hard, and basically refused to shake the hand of her opponent, Imani Khalif. It later emerges that Imani Khalif, in a previous competition, had failed a gender test, and she, as well as another fighter, Lin Yuting from Taiwan, were both disqualified from a previous competition for failing a gender test. Now, what does this the content of this gender test is really what becomes controversial. Now, how does this typically work? Now, there's a few ways to do a gender test, but obviously the typical way that it's done in boxing competitions, is one where they check the chromosomes. Now, this is where it gets complicated. Imani Khalif happens to have, or allegedly has, XY chromosomes. Now, if you remember your high school biology, you realize that if you're XX in your chromosomes, you typically have the physical and reproductive expression of a woman. If you have chromosome XY, that Y chromosome there, that difference here, means you have the physical and biological expression associated with a man. Most of the time. Anyways, now this little clause I just put here in terms of most of the time, well, the internet was not particularly, let's just say the internet was not abreast of the extra detail there. And as you expect in true internet fashion, the internet, as you know, is undefeated. Lots of really famous people chime in, because here's the thing. Men should not, or biological men should never be allowed to compete, especially not in combat sports where you can potentially get really hurt. Imagine getting hit with the strength of a man as a woman in a boxing match. Not very cool, right? So the internet obviously leapt to the defense and to try and condemn Imani Khalif for being a man fighting against a poor woman, right? So here's what famous people like. Here's what J.K. Rowling, for example. If you don't know who J.K. Rowling is, she wrote the Harry Potter series. So if you read and seen those movies, that's how it works. But essentially, in seeing the picture of Imani Khalif and the emotional Angela Kirini, J.K. Rowling says, "Could any picture sum up our new men's rights movements better?" She wrote on X, formerly known as Twitter, and basically, she shared a picture that seemingly showed Khalif smirking while comforting Angela Kirini, right? And J.K. Rowling proceeds to add, "The smirk of a male who knows he's protected by a misogynistic sporting establishment, enjoying the distress of a woman he has just punched in the head, and whose life's ambition he has just shattered." Other sort of really famous personalities like Elon Musk, Israel Adesanya, the fighter from the UFC, chime in here. What did Elon Musk say? Musk shared a post from swimmer Riley Gaines that claimed Riley Gaines in his post on X said, "Men don't belong in women's sports." Nothing wrong with that, by the way. Men do not belong in women's sports, but there's a clause there, and we'll discuss that a bit more. But Musk obviously co-signed the message by writing absolutely. But the Olympics stood by its decision to allow Khalif to contest because she was born a female and essentially she was raised a female and has a female passport. This was not a case of being transgender. It turns out this is just her natural self. Yes, Imani Khalif does have XY chromosomes. Yes, she does have elevated really high testosterone levels, or according to reports, she does have XY chromosomes, does have elevated testosterone levels that would typically be associated with a man. However, she is a woman as far as the information that we have. And you might wonder, how is it possible that a person can have XY chromosomes, which are typically associated with a man, and still be a woman? Well, it turns out that there are biological explanations for this. Rare conditions that can allow a woman to have XY chromosomes while still being phenotypically female, if you know what I mean. And these differences in sexual development, DSDs, they're a group of conditions involving your genes, your hormones, and your reproductive organs. Obviously, this is not verified. We don't know exactly what the condition of Imani Khalif is. It's obviously really personal. Maybe not so personal because she's in competition with people here. But one condition, an example, is the Swyer syndrome, which is a rare genetic condition in which an individual has one X chromosome and one Y chromosome in each cell, which is typically found in males, but they have female reproductive structures. Obviously, with the Y chromosome, there is the associated testosterone production that follows that. So this is not a case of her cheating, at least not willfully. This is natural within her, right? This is not a case of her being trans. It's not. So you can imagine this being controversial. At the same time, well, it's not her fault, but it's obviously not fair to the other people that are contesting without these advantages. Now, you could argue, what is sports without physical advantages? People contest with advantages all the time. Why does this matter? Some people argue that Michael Phelps had a physical advantage of producing less lactic acid compared to his competitors. People have contested with advantages before. This is not new. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. This does open a really big discussion in terms of this is maybe for once I agree with a lot of the gender scientists that have continued to tell us that gender is a spectrum. Maybe for once it's time to take that seriously. But that does present a question. That does present a very important question. How do you determine who's eligible to contest for what? How do you make sports fair in the face of, if you can accept on board based on the evidence of Imani Khalif that gender is a spectrum and we're not binary as humans in the sense of male and female, that there's gray areas in between, and there are people that we strive to include in sports who may not fall into these typical categories. How do we make sports fair? How do we define the eligibility criteria? So that was that. As I said, I spent a lot of time on it because, as I said, it was arguably the biggest controversy of the Paris Olympics. So I'll move on to the number 3 here. Number 3, Canada Spygate. So here's the story. A bunch of staff on the Canadian women's soccer team, the managing staff, got caught spying on an opponent on the New Zealand women's national team. And trust me, the fallout from this has been crazy. Here's the story according to Yahoo Sports, right? The prosecutor's office said that a supervisor of the Olympic training site informed police that a drone was hovering over Auguste Dury Stadium on Monday. The team manager of New Zealand had informed the supervisor of the drone and immediately stopped the training session. Police later arrested 43-year-old Joseph Lombardi, an unaccredited analyst with the Canadian women's soccer team, who was operating the drone and filmed the closed-door training session. Lombardi's hotel room was searched and the drone was seized. He admitted that the videos of the 2 closed training sessions, including one from July 20th, had enabled him to learn the tactics of the opposing team. Lombardi was charged with flying an unmanned aircraft over a prohibited area and accepted an 8-month suspended sentence. Assistant coach Jasmine Mander was interviewed and not charged. So obviously, as this controversy hit, it obviously, sent ripples around around the Canadian Olympic team, and in the fallout of this, head coach of the Canadian women's soccer team, Bev Priestman, was relieved of her duties essentially. But that's not where this story ends. That's really if it ended there, it would it would have been nice, Here's where it really gets extra controversial. The drone incident at the Olympics essentially sparked controversy that the Canadian national team has done this for years. There's talk that this is not just limited to the Canadian women's team, and apparently this is something that has gone on for years with Canadian national teams. The female team has been caught with their hands in the cookie jar now, but there's even suspicion that the male team might have used these spying techniques during the Copa America, recently completed Copa America, which casts a real shadow on what that team achieved. They did so well at Copa America to come fourth in the competition, and that just casts a shadow on everything. Number 4, Cocaine Down Under. Now, this one is probably one that you guys have not heard a lot. You guys probably missed in the craziness of what the Olympics is. But this one is better read than paraphrased. So I'm going to read you the story of what happens here. So, French prosecutors have detained a member of the Australian field hockey team at the Paris Olympics on allegations of trying to score cocaine. Authorities say police interrupted a drug transaction outside a building in the capital's 9th arrondissement in the night between Tuesday and Wednesday. The case has been taken over by police and by the police anti-drug unit, and the 17-year-old alleged seller has been arrested too. Okay, so this Australian athlete, field hockey athlete, gets caught trying to buy cocaine during the Olympics from a 17-year-old. Now, if you guys were wondering if cocaine is allowed in for people performing in the Olympics, your answer is no. So kids, stay off the drugs, especially when you have an opportunity of a lifetime and stuff like that. Maybe stay off the drugs there. And the latest story from the Independent here basically says Australia's Olympic hockey player Tom Craig, the guy caught trying to buy cocaine, was released from police custody and apologized to his family and teammates on Wednesday after being arrested in Paris for buying cocaine. Craig, 28, a silver medalist at the Tokyo Olympics 3 years ago, has played more than 100 games for the national side for the Australian men's field hockey team. And here is words here. He says, I'd firstly like to apologize for what has occurred in the last 24 hours. I made a terrible mistake. I take full responsibility for my actions. My actions are my own and in no way reflect the values of my family, my teammates, my friends, my sport, and the Australian Olympic team. I've embarrassed you all. I'm truly sorry. Okay, so that's obviously pretty short and sweet there with that controversy. Number 5, the final controversy, and for me, the one I take really personally, the biggest controversy for me is essentially the most important, the one I really take to heart. The US men's national team was an absolute joke. Someone thought it was a good idea for the rest of the world to play a small kid called Steph Curry and another small kid called LeBron James and another not so big kid called Kevin Durant in the same US team. How the heck did someone think that was fair to the rest of the world? I think that was scandalous of the USA to do that. What happened was what I expected to happen. They went all the way, took on all comers, and in the right moments, their superstars showed up. They had some shaky moments here and there, but they did what they were expected to do. And you know what was funny? They had the luxury of not playing Jason Tatum. Now, if you watch basketball and you know how good Jason Tatum is, you know why this is so silly. They had the luxury of not playing Jason Tatum. And as if they were not good enough, they had the luxury to chop and change Joel Embiid and Anthony Davis at center. They had Drew Holiday. They had Anthony Edwards. Wow. But, as I kind of round up that silliness, I got to mention a special team that, and I say this because, as you guys might know by now, I'm originally from Nigeria, and I was really proud of how far the Nigerian girls, the Nigerian female, the Nigerian female basketball team, the Tigress, how far they went in the Olympics. They got to the quarterfinals the first time for an African team. So shout out to those girls. You guys did a great job. But yeah, so those are the 5 scandals that I picked up on in these Olympics. If I've missed one, you add it in the chat. And if you're new around here, don't forget to subscribe down below. Catch up on all the rest of the content. We'll be bringing interviews back soon. So you guys stay tuned. Take care of yourselves.